Welcome everyone to today's webinar, Getting Involved with Your Child's Learning, 5 Simple Strategies for Helping Struggling and Advanced Learners, presented by Dr. Stephanie VanDeventer, Kaiser University Graduate School faculty. Thank you so much, as well as Dr. Ashley Robertson, also Kaiser University Graduate School faculty. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. We are delighted to be here. I'm Dr. VanDeventer, and my colleague, Dr. Robertson, is presenting with me today. And we could not be more thrilled than to be presenting to you on this topic. And we've done some other presentations for the center, and we have others coming up. I hope you'll find this interesting. We're going to show you some websites today very quickly because time goes so fast when you're doing one of these presentations. And we're also going to talk about these 5 strategies that we have identified for helping learners. My background is in instructional design. I was at the University of South Florida for about 30 years. I've owned an instructional design company that I started from the ground up and ran that for about 10 years. And for the last 8 years, I've been with Kaiser University. I know that makes me sound like I'm 100 years old, but I've done a lot in my career, and it's all been in the field of education, and I've just loved it. So I'm happy to be here today, and I'll let Dr. Robertson introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again so much for being here. I am also in the field of education, and that's where the bulk of my background came from. I was a high school English teacher in Florida for a number of years before I transitioned into administration with some charter schools in Florida, and then into more consulting in the areas of instructional design and curriculum. And I am also a full-time faculty member at Kaiser University. I'm the program coordinator for our PhD in education courses, and one of Dr. VanDeventer's colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things, and this will just give you an overview. We're going to discuss very briefly some types of learners, what type of learner might your student or your child be, and some when to step in and help, some things to look for to know whether or not you really need to offer help. And we're going to talk about these 5 strategies, which are self-checking and self-monitoring. We'll get into those in more depth as we go along, give you some ideas for how to offer meaningful remediation and what that involves, how to offer meaningful enrichment for your child, and the understanding and ways in which you can talk with your child about how failure is actually an option, and sometimes it has good things to go along with it.
All right, so to get started today, I'm going to provide just a brief overview of some of the big topics that we're going to be focusing on today. And we're kind of narrowing in to 2 different types of learners that we're going to run into, and especially learners who are learning in this new arena of online instruction, or you may have your child doing kind of both, where they're going into school and they're also staying at home some of the days. So the 2 types of learners that we're going to focus on, the first would be those who really need help getting started, those who may be struggling with motivation or staying on task. Maybe learners who are a little bit behind in the content, or they're having trouble with reading, understanding instructions, and they're really having a difficult time kind of navigating what they're learning. The other learner that we're going to focus in on will be more of the highly motivated learner. They may show boredom and need some enrichment. They may breeze through work really quickly, or kind of take their own approach at getting things done. And because of that, you may see that they could be a little disorganized or all over the place. So some of the things we'll talk about today will focus in on how we can outline tasks, use timers, offer some alternatives to space organization, and some recommended sites and technology that can help you work with either of these learners that you may be experiencing. Right, so some of the things to think about in terms of when to step in and help. And this is important to think about because we do want to provide our learners the opportunity to struggle a little bit. That's how you learn. When you take something new in, you think about it, you reflect, you struggle with that content. And then once you understand it, you begin applying it. So how am I supposed to know as a parent or as a teacher when I should really step in and when it is a normal part of the learning process to allow the child to struggle? So if you notice a child is getting frustrated or they're bored or the content is too easy or too hard, that may be time to step in and consider some alternative methods to engage them, to offer some opportunities to let them ask for help or to give them help if they're really frustrated and don't know where to go with navigating their learning. So we're going to look at some things to kind of help narrow this down a little bit today. And go ahead to the next slide. And these are going to come in the form of 5 different strategies for both of those types of learners, the ones that are struggling and the ones that are a little bit ahead. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview here, and then I'm going to let Dr. VanDeventer start with getting into some of the details of each of these. So the basic 5 strategies, we always start off with a self-check. What is the child thinking? How are they feeling? Let them communicate that to you the best they can. And then the next step would be self-monitoring. So stop, take a breath, and think about, is there really a problem happening here that you can help? Or is this a normal part of the learning process that the child may need just that basic reinforcement and to continue moving through? If you notice there is a problem, the next step would be giving that meaningful remediation to support them, or the meaningful enrichment to support them. So you're going to choose most often one or the other, and then being there as a guide for when the student does fail, to learn how to take that failure and use it as a learning opportunity.
So one of the things you want to think about is, what is your child actually thinking or saying? You might be looking at the situation from the outside and going, oh boy, there's a real problem here. But you don't necessarily stop to gauge what's happening with the child. And you want to think about the comments that they're offering that are going to help you identify the real nature of the problem. And some of those comments fall into these categories of, I'm confused, I need help, I'm frustrated. But you can see that these actually break down, and we can start putting them in categories, and they might be things that can be broken into whether it's motivation or whether they actually need help. You might want to ask them more questions to try to figure out whether they really need help. If they're saying that they're confused or something is too hard, or they need more information, they probably need remediation. And these can probably cross over in categories to some degree. I'm frustrated might mean remediation, but it could mean that they just need some more motivation. It can also be enrichment in some cases, because a child can feel frustrated and also bored. So they could be frustrated and they could be annoyed because what they're doing is just too easy for them and they don't feel engaged. So if they say, hang on a second, I've almost got this, they think it's happening quickly, they're learning it. They might tell you, I really want to try to do X. I've learned a little bit about volcanoes, but now I want to learn more about where they are in the world. Or I'm already done, I don't know what to do next. So those are the kind of things that can lead you to understand that your child might need enrichment. And when we say remediation, that means stopping to offer help, and there's a specific way to do it. And enrichment is a little broader, and it means offering activities that take them beyond what they've already learned and giving them some new things to both think about and some new things to do. And motivation simply means they are tired of what they're doing. Maybe they don't like doing school this way, and they don't understand why they have to do it. Now, we're not talking a lot about that this week, but In our last session, we did talk about structure and orienting and organizing sessions by using some timers and some ways to outline the amount of time a student spends on things. And that can help to motivate them if they know that they're going to spend 20 minutes on this, and then they're going to have a break and they're going to get a snack, then they're going to spend 20 more minutes on it. They know that there's some parameters, and it can be a little more motivating than thinking they've got 6 hours ahead of them to study something. So those are some things to think about to start with. When we think about self-monitoring, this is interesting because self-monitoring means to just stop and figure out whether there's really a problem. When we self-monitor, we are engaging our brain. It's kind of like, it's one of the things that experts do. When you become an expert, and all of you out there listening are experts in something in your life that you've become extremely good at. And our kids and our students are on the path to becoming experts. And actually, in some cases, they already are experts at certain things. We don't, they're different for each child, but they might be really good at certain things in their lives and maybe perhaps better than us. So when we self-monitor, what we're doing is we're stopping to think about where we are on the path of solving something or learning and figuring out if there's a problem. So you want to stop and think about your progress. You want to see whether you've done it right along the way. So when your child expresses that they might be experiencing a problem and you think it might be time for remediation, you can just take a little break and say, well, let's think about how you've done here. Did you think you made some mistakes? How are you doing? Does anything, what seems to be the problem? How are things going wrong? And if it's wrong, let's see how we could fix it. And when you stop to take time with this, sometimes you find out that there isn't really a problem, that maybe they just got confused. They weren't sure where they were in the learning. Maybe they just needed one quick little tweak to help them. But when you self-monitor, and this is what an expert does, when an expert self-monitors along the way, and all experts do it, they're solving a problem and they're stopping, and their brain is operating on another level at the same time. And we're teaching our kids to do it consciously, but experts are doing it without thinking. They're running through the problem as they're doing it, and they're asking themselves along the way, did I make a mistake? They're self-checking as they go along. When they get to the end of a problem, they've got the correct solution. And I give this example of that happened to me. I was building a desk from IKEA, and I had the whole desk put together, almost was at the last part when I realized that the front panel of this enormous desk I had built was turned around backwards. And that was the second thing I put together on the whole crazy desk. So because I wasn't self-monitoring and double checking myself along the way, I had to go back and take that entire thing apart and turn that panel around and start over again. So that also taught me that I learned something from my mistake. But had I been self-monitoring, and this is a conscious act we can teach our kids, they will know along the way when there's been a problem, and they can stop, fix it, and then go on, instead of getting 10 steps in and knowing that there's finding a problem then when it's really complicated to solve it.
All right. I think, Dr. VanDeventer, we have all experienced that same IKEA problem. I don't know why. Let me just do a quick overview here before we talk about the next step. So we first have been approached or overheard our child saying something. I'm confused. I need help. This is too easy. I'm bored. And that triggers us to think about, okay, do they need help? Are they way ahead and they're bored out of their mind? Do they need some motivation or some sort of timer or a break? So our brain, almost as experts, when we hear those comments, should go there. Then the next thing that we do is we help that child self-monitor. So we help them check for accuracy. We determine, is there something quick that we can fix, or if there's something that went wrong, we sit there with them and we try and talk them through it. And then we determine from there if there is a problem and where that problem lies. Am I on Am I on the right track there, Dr. VanDeventer?
You are, because we don't want, remediation goes more deeply. You can fix a problem without having to go into deep remediation, which is changing maybe something conceptually wrong or changing a skill. And sometimes we're just doing a little correction without having to go into remediation. So it can be frustrating for a child if the parent or the teacher jumps into remediation and all they needed was a little help with understanding one simple thing or correcting something tiny. Then really they didn't need any deep remediation. So that's why we want to teach them to self-monitor and for us to do it first before we jump into giving them help that they may not really need.
All right, good. So we have steps 1 and 2. So then step 3 would probably be where we determine if they do need remediation, how we're going to support them before we get into step 4, do they need enrichment instead? So we're looking at usually either 3 or 4, or once they have mastered it, maybe moving on to enrichment. So let's talk a little bit about giving meaningful remediation. This is the first time, when a student is struggling and we want to sit down with them, definitely being respectful and kind, but also providing them helpful, informative support that doesn't give them the answer, but supports them for how they can find it, how they can ask for help, how they can maybe search for help. So we really want to be careful as we're providing this first interaction that we're not dismissive or hurtful, or we provide information that's confusing. And if it's something as a parent that you don't know yourself, even teaching the child how they ask the question of the teacher, if that's the direction it needs to go, provides a great learning experience for that kid to learn how to ask information and when they need it. So let's go through just a quick example of what positive remediation could sound like. All right, so remember, first of all, it should be respectful, informative, and helpful. All right, so we have here, good try, but not quite, Alex. In the story, the main idea is related to the character's feelings about one of his family members. That's what the story is focusing on. Let's think about this answer again. All right, so now let's break down what is within this remediation that we are giving to the child. So first of all, good try. Would you like to think about this again? Is respectful, and it's putting that ball back into the student's court to really think through and not just be given the answer that they're struggling with. Okay. The next one is we want to be informative. So we're reminding them that the main idea is related to what this character is feeling. So remember, the main idea is what this whole section of the story is about. So that's going to trigger what they should have learned in class when they learned what main idea is. And then we still haven't given them any information. So now we want to try and be helpful to them to direct them in that right direction. So here are some things to think about. First, we ask them if they want a hint, right? Because if it's a student who really doesn't need this remediation, they may say, oh yeah, I remember what main idea is, I'm good. But if it's a student that's struggling and they really can't connect the two ideas together, that may be then where we provide this remediation. So for example, here are some things to think about. What is happening between Jamil and Rasha? How does that affect how Rasha is feeling? Does she have any choices regarding those feelings or interactions? So notice that we are asking the students questions. We're not giving them the answer, but we're allowing them to talk through the direction where at the end we would then say, okay, now from everything that we talked about here, what do you think the main idea is? in this section of the story. And then hopefully they'll be able to move forward.
And we would do the same thing with this is one example from main idea in language arts, but it would be the same in science or math. And when you're using online software with your child, these are some of the things to look at in software. There are all types of levels of quality of programs available. And some of them are simply going to be like flashcard based and drill and practice. And they may not give very much in the way of positive, helpful, kind, respectful remediation, but sometimes they do. We've seen a big change in that over the last 10 years, where software has become, and the online courseware has become much more helpful and giving hints and helpful with remediation and more informative without giving the answer right away. So as you're looking at things for your child to do online, those are some of the things to consider as to whether or not the program offers some positive sorts of remediation. And then you will then search for as well things that you can use for remediation. And that's what we're going to show you next.
Yeah, I want to jump in just quick here too. So you all at this point have talked through with your child and done the best you can do as a parent to help support them. We do not expect that parents or ourselves are experts in every subject that your child may be learning. So if your kid is deep into calculus in their senior year of high school and they are stuck, you're probably not going to break out the calculus book and talk through the equations that they're trying to figure out. So if you notice that, talking through and getting them to think through what the problem itself is asking is not enough, then you may need to go to some of those outside resources to maybe help reteach or remediate a little bit deeper if the child is really struggling with the content versus just being able to answer what the questions or what the task is asking them to do.
That's great advice. Thank you, Dr. Robertson. And I want to add that those of you listening, if you're teachers, you already know this, and if you're parents, you're going to find it out if you haven't already. There are thousands of places to go on the internet to get information. And what we're showing you, and we're going to have a list available through the center that is going to offer you all of the places we mentioned today, and even some other ones that we're not going to. We're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on every one of these websites, but there are so many good ones out there. And a lot of these really good ones are repeated over and over in compilations from places that you'll go to and you'll see. For instance, this one on the bottom of the screen, Best Math Websites, IXL Learning, is mentioned in many different places. Hand to Mind is mentioned in several different places. In fact, it's mentioned on CPALMs and the Florida DOE resources as a good resource for remediation and learning for math and some different literacy, language arts skills. There's a place called Common Sense Media. We'll look at that in a minute. And commonsense.org actually has a section on science, a section on math, a section on media. And it's very helpful for kids. If you just want your kids to take a look at how they should operate in the online and the digital world, there's a whole section on traversing the digital landscape, and it's very useful. Common Sense has gotten a great deal of accolades from many different places that are gathering information about the best sites. Another one is called We Are Teachers. This is a place where teachers list and they sort of vet some of the best sites that they've found and that they like using in the classroom. So you'll see these sites over and over again. And I thought we would just take a look real quickly at a couple of them and see how they work a little bit. I'm not going to go deeply into them, but you'll be able to go to these later yourself and take a look. And the first one is going to be that IXL. So when you go to IXL Learning, it allows you to search on their website for different categories that you're interested in. So let's suppose that you have a child that's in 8th grade, and you'll see on each of these, there's math, language arts, science, and social studies, and different skills that you can practice on in each of these categories and these different levels. So if my child was having trouble in 8th grade with language arts, I could go there and ask to see those skills. And then I could, let's suppose they were having trouble with reading and understanding the author's purpose and tone. I could scroll down here till I found something that was relevant to that. And then I could select that and get information on that specific one. So all of these things will take you to either a video, a small test, or a teacher directed lesson plan that the student can do online in the program itself. I wanted to try to find one on, let's see here. Oh, let's just take a look at this. Is this a sentence fragment or is this a complete sentence? So in this, the student can take a quick little test and they can go through answering some things about sentence fragments. There are other parts of the program that are more advanced that'll take them through understanding the formality of sentences and understanding comprehension of the main idea and things along those lines. And you simply would be able to go in here and pick at any of these levels, 5th grade math skills. And then you can also search up in here for a specific skill that you might be looking for, and then put that in and get help with that. It'll take you directly to it. So it's very useful, and the child can do it themselves, or you could search for things as the parent. And you can see they cover math, language arts, science, social studies, and they even have a connection to the Florida standards. And this IXL is recommended by a number of different sites that are compiling these. I wanted to show now the hand to mind real quickly. And this is also recommended, I believe, by CPALMS. And on hand to mind, they have, it's similar. You'll find that all of these places typically allow you to look by grade level, by topic, which is usually math, science, and literacy or language arts. And this one says STEM. So, and you can go, sometimes you can search in multiple ways, which we'll look at in a minute on CPALMS. And this one actually has entire curricula that you can walk through week by week, or you can search for specific things. So we'll take a look at a particular grade level here. Let's look at some math lessons. And let's see, we're in grade 5 math, and we could look for math worksheets that we could have our child do to help them with decimals and fractions. And we could simply go to that, and it'll give them an opportunity to download that or do it on screen and get more help with those particular types of worksheets. So if they're having trouble, this is a good way to remediate and give them a little bit more help. And I want to go now to show you the Florida DOE website. This is such a comprehensive website. I'm not even going to go to small pieces of it, but I'm going to scroll down a little bit so that you can see some of the extensive material that's mentioned and the topics that are on this site. You can look at the standards. There's a parent guide for mathematics. You can type information in here and find what you're looking for. Here I could look for math grade 4, or I could go back to what I want to do here is just go to Florida DOE without that, floridadoe.org. Let's see. Take out math. See what we get here. Anyway, you can see that on this particular site, there's all kinds of things that you can find that have to do with the DOE. And they also have recommendations for using hand to mind and IXL. One of the things that is used heavily is the CPALMS. And I think you wanted to show some examples of that, Dr. Robertson.
Yes, so with CPALMS, I think I put the instructions right on the slide, but I'll kind of walk you through it as you're going through. So CPALMS is, as Dr. VanDeventer said, is the State Board of Education website where they have built a ton of online resources to help teachers, parents, and students. So let's just look quick. These are organized by standards, just to let you guys know. And I know as parents, sometimes you don't know the exact standards that students are working towards, but you can also search by grade level, class, the subject area, if you know what it is they're learning. So let's start by clicking, I'm a Florida parent. And if you look at these tabs here, there's 3 tabs. The first one's original student tutorials. The second one is perspective videos, and then student resources. And if you look at the bottom, it says access the tutorials on floridastudents.org. And I'll show you that website in a minute, but it's pretty much just another way to access these resources for students. So go ahead, Dr. VanDeventer, and actually click on where it says original student tutorials. And then, oh, sorry, on the bottom it says access the tutorials on CPOMs.
On CPOMs, okay.
Yeah, go back one. And we'll go here in a second. I'll just show you what this one looks like first. But yep, on the bottom, access the tutorials on CPOMs. And the nice thing about this is you can actually search either by phrase for a specific subject area that you're looking for, or you can break it down by subject and grade level if you're doing kind of a more broad search. So let's look at it that way. Let's go to subject, the drop-down menu, and let's click science. And then let's go to the drop-down menu for grade, and let's click grade 8 because we know that that's a SSA content area, 8th grade science. And let's hit submit. And this will bring up just some different resources that they'll have for you, and you might have to scroll down. All right. And I said, let's take a look at the one that says sunny with a side of photons, how to build a sun. That one looks pretty cool. This is one of the things they learn about in 8th grade science. And you can see here that it has a video. Go ahead and you hit resume or start.
Sunny with a side of photons, how to build a sun. An interactive science tutorial for students like you.
All right, go ahead and hit pause there.
Journey through the sun to see.
We're not going to learn about the sun in today's professional development. We can do that a different time. But the nice part is that it has a kind of a search, or not a search bar, but a bar on the side that goes through each of the sections that this tutorial is going to cover. So if your kid's learning about the sun, what, you know, the energy created by the sun and the different structures of it, and they're really analyzing the sun, and they need some of that remediation in science because maybe they had a hard time with a reading that the teacher gave them about the sun. This is a great alternative way to teach them about that. So let's go back up to the top, and there is a home button. Just click on home of CPOMs and it'll bring you right back to that start page. And let's just go in from the alternative access here. So click I'm a student. And this brings you directly to that website, floridastudents.org. Go ahead and click on it. And this is just broken down by subject area. So instead of having a specific search, you could go in by subject. So let's go to English language arts. And let's look at grades 6 through 8. And let's do the language arts 1, the first one. Okay, now these are broken down by specific standards that the students would work on. So scroll down a little bit, and I believe there's one about citing textual evidence from an inferencing, maybe. Yeah, let's try. Yeah, that looks good. And yep, the pavement bookworm. So click on the title of the pavement bookworm. So if your child is having trouble citing evidence as they're reading in order to support something, maybe in their writing or answering questions, again, this would be a great tutorial to give them where they'll be given an example and some different practice and interactive ways to practice.
An interactive English language arts tutorial for students like you.
All right, and it kind of brings them through all of the different parts of this lesson. So these are actually full lessons that a student could use as remediation. The other thing that I wanted to show, and I know I'm going to throw you off with this one, Dr. VanDeventer, but can you just go up to that search bar and can you type in CPOM's access points?
It's not activating. Let's see here. All right, there we go. CPOM's access points.
Yeah, let's go to the big search bar though. Or go to like Google first.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see if that brings us there. So, okay, so yeah, let's try that. There we go. So now this is another access to a lot of those similar resources, but these are the resources that are aligned to access points so for those of you who are parents out there, you know that your child is working on those access points standards. This is a great way, again, to search for remediation and support based on those standards. So you can just, sure, click on math, whatever grade level, geometry.
It's interesting. Yeah, geometry grade 2.
Yeah. And the interesting part about access points, and I just want to point this out, is when you guys are looking at them, basically it is a breakdown of the state standards, and they put them in very basic terms so that anybody who's reading them, any parent would understand, instead of citing contextual evidence from nonfiction text, instead of that language, it will break it down and actually say students can find examples from a reading to support their main idea or something like that. So the access points are written in very easy, user-friendly language. So that's just another alternative to search for some of the resources out there that you can give your child to help support them if they need that remediation. All right, I think we can go back to the presentation. I apologize, guys, for that being such a quick overview. There's just so many resources. So if you find that the resource in general will be helpful to you, you may have to, spend a little bit of time or lock away a little bit of time to look through there and look at all the alternative ways that you can search for resources to help support students you're teaching or your child as they're learning. So if we move on from remediation and, you have gone through the first 2 steps where you've heard a complaint from your child, you've sat down with them, you understand, where they're struggling, and you find that maybe the content was just too easy for them or they finished so quickly, the next step would be asking yourself, do they need meaningful enrichment? So enrichment basically leaves room for the child to take what they've already learned and to explore and build and create and to kind of dig deeper into that content to really see how it applies in the outside world or how it connects to something in the future that they're going to be learning. In these instances, some structure is good. But you also, if students are enriching, you want to leave this more in their hands to be open-ended and to be able to reflect and to think about what they're learning and to self-monitor, as Dr. VanDeventer talked about before, as they become experts and truly understand what it is they're learning. Right? So, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we come from such a task-oriented society where you have to be busy and showing yourself to be busy to make it seem like you're producing. And in fact, that's not the case in many other societies. And some studies have been done that have shown that we each need at least a half an hour a day of just time to think, even if it's not contiguous, but time when we're thinking about something. And when we are thinking, that's also working. We can't get things done by simply constantly responding and acting. We have to plan what we're going to be doing. So your child needs that same reflective opportunity, especially when they're getting involved in doing something that involves enrichment.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about how to help loosely structure that enrichment so that time can be spent on that thinking and reflective process. We would recommend setting a timer for that planned thinking time. So if they're brainstorming, if they're, looking through a field trip, or they're going into the Smithsonian Museum and they're digging deeper into, maybe a war and all the artifacts about a war that they're learning about in history class, set a timer for that. Also ask them to record their ideas or thoughts in a journal, or to write down or talk about some of the outside of the box things that they're thinking about or they're learning. Brainstorming or using some sort of online resource for journaling is a very cool idea. There are apps on phones and tablets where you can journal, or there's some really cool mind mapping and brainstorming tools. So if you have, your child maybe watching a video or doing a field trip or visiting the San Diego Zoo because they're learning about zoology in biology class, having them maybe write down some of the cool things they learned in a mind map or a brain cloud would be kind of a cool way to get them to think and enrich and reflect on what they're learning. So on the screen, we do have a couple websites, which we're not going to show you today. You can go to these, but they are free brainstorming and mind mapping tools that you can download, and very easy, user-friendly, where the kid can just kind of put their thoughts and reflections and pictures and things like that as they're digging deeper into that content that they're learning. Okay, so on the next slide here, Dr. VanDeventer is going to talk to us a little bit more about some other sites that kind of move us past remediation, which we showed you in a lot of those standards and specific subject-based sites, and more into some online resources for enrichment to dig deeper into some of those things that we're learning in class.
These sites are just some that we've vetted that are very rich. You could spend a lot of time finding information on these sites, and there are field trips available on We Are Teachers. There's some great simulations on there. Smithsonian Education, which we talked about last week, is an incredible site. There's so much on the smithsonian.org .edu that your child could spend days on there. They have things oriented just toward children. They have things for teachers. They have field trips. I'll show you that in a minute. PBS is the same, and you can look very similarly to some of the others by grade level, by topic. NASA has some of the similar sorts of things. Annenberg Learner has a lot of wonderful videos, and we're going to look very quickly at one in a minute. That's an excellent sort of up-to-date video on understanding probability. The Nature Conservancy has a lot of great sorts of things that work with kids all the way from elementary school forward. We'll look real quickly at Smithsonian, and let's go here. When you first come to the Smithsonian screen, you'll find that there's so much on here to do. And one thing you can do is say, what's on, what's happening today? What are today's events? And what are the online events? If you look at the online events, it will show you things that you can do that day with your child, or that your child could do, and the time when those things are happening. Today, for instance, at 2 o'clock, they're having a thing called Fossils Live that's going to be online. At 2:30, they're having an Inspiration Action, a thing about a session about segregation. There's a teacher workshop on women's science and portraiture. There's so many wonderful things available, and you can look at the calendar and go forward to see what's coming up so that you know you could sign up for that. There's also exhibitions. There's things that show you what's happening on today's events, and then you can go into the Explore and Learn section. There's a section here for educators and a section for kids. If you look at this section for educators, it has resources on field trips, events, and it eventually breaks down into lesson plans in some areas. Smithsonian is so rich, you would really have to spend time just looking through here, but it's worth the time just to see what's available. I showed a few things last time. I want to show today, if you go on here and look for some of the things for kids, they have all kinds of things that are wonderful for enrichment that would be relevant to art, that might be relevant to history, American stories, National Portrait Gallery, Civil War mysteries, just scrolling through. And you can search for things too for enrichment that your child might particularly be interested in. I'm not going to spend more time on Smithsonian because it's a huge rabbit hole. Once we get involved here, you could be on it all day. There's so much to see. And there's a panda cam. You can see the pandas that were born there, and you can name the pandas, that kind of thing. This comes up, it's the learning lab where the kids can go in and actually have learning experiences. So it's absolutely fascinating website, and I highly recommend it. Annenberg Learner is, again, has resources for teachers as well as for professional development for teachers. You may not know that, teachers that are listening, that help you to get certified even. And then they have classroom instruction multimedia resources. And you can, again, in this case, search by grade level and by subject area. I want to show you one brief Annenberg Learner against all odds. This is a simple, they have a whole series about probability. And this whole section talks about, for instance, if your children are learning or your child is learning statistics in secondary education, then they might be having trouble, or they might need remediation, or they might be interested in learning more about it. And this is these have great videos to take you through everything you would want to learn about that topic.
Annenberg Learner. Hello, I'm Party Sabetti, and this is Against All Odds, where we make statistics count. I'm a computational geneticist, which means I spend a lot of time trying to find patterns in piles and piles of data. I like to think of myself as pretty good with numbers, but I need a way to figure out if what I think is a pattern really is. And that's when I turn to statistics. It's a way to
So I won't stay on that, but you can see that they make it come alive. Someone's doing this in their profession, showing you what they do and how it works in their world. And this is very interesting. And if you look on the right here in the directory, this is a 7-minute video on what is statistics, but they take you through all kinds of there's 36 different areas that you could look at if you're more interested in that. And there are, on the Annenberg Learner website, all kinds of videos that cover education that stems from almost every area of science, mathematics, and even some things in history and language arts. So I strongly urge taking a look at that. PBS and the Nature Conservancy are two other sites that I think are really interesting. The Nature Conservancy is a wonderful site that is very interesting we're going to talk next week about certain types of learners. So they're very interested in looking at things out in the real world. And let's take a look real quickly at one of the things they do. They have a thing called Nature Lab. And it's a really fun sort of factory that has virtual field trips. And they have a program on here on climate change.
Hi, everyone. I'm Victoria, and I'm going to be your host on today's virtual field trip. Although it is a little hard to go anywhere when I'm stuck here at my desk. Oh, there we go. Now I can get around much easier in this.
So and she's going to take you on different field trips all over the world. And this one she does today is on changing climate. This is a very rich site that I'd strongly recommend spending some time on. And the virtual field trips are excellent. And there are some wonderful activities for kids to get involved in too. These are good for both enrichment and remediation and motivation too, because kids just love being involved in them. And they're engaging, they have high interest, and they pull kids into the topics and the topic areas. How much time do we have left here? Let's see, we're getting close to the end. All right. I was also going to show you real quickly this, which is We Are Teachers. I mentioned that website earlier. The We Are Teachers website, this has 60 awesome websites for teaching and learning math. They have other things as well. This is just the one I pulled up. But when you go to the We Are Teachers site, you can look for topics, you can look for categories, you can look for grade levels. They have information on every subject area and every grade level. And it changes constantly because teachers are vetting and adding new information. And they'll send you out to sites that they find useful. And you'll see that some of those are some of the ones we mentioned here. Let me go back to the presentation. I strongly recommend taking a little time to look at some of these. PBS is another great site, and they've got some outstanding ways to search and wonderful media that's available to you, very similar to Smithsonian and Annenberg Learner, as well as the Nature Conservancy. We Are Teachers, in addition, has field trips that are similar to the one you just saw in the Nature Conservancy. So these are some of the sites, again, and we're going to provide you with a listing of all of these listed on a document that can be sent to you from the organization, from the center. DragonBox is another wonderful math program. Some of these, everything we're showing you today is essentially free. DragonBox is the only thing that is has a small app price, and occasionally you do come across those. It's highly recommended by many of these best of the best organizations. It's wonderful for teaching and remediating math. It costs, I think their little app price is $7.99 to buy it, and then you can put it on your computer or on your iPad or your phone for use by your kids. And maybe that's not so unreasonable when you think about the price we pay for apps that we use for ourselves all the time. Any comments, Dr. Robertson, at this point?
Nope, I think these are some great resources. And again, we're going to provide that list of the different ones that you can go to, definitely for remediation or for enrichment. Okay. These are also some more of the other ones that we looked at a minute ago: Smithsonian, Nature Conservancy, Annenberg, PBS, NASA. They all are filled with rich information. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is simply remembering strategy number 5, that failure is not bad. When we make a mistake and we learn from it, it's part of that process of learning how to self-monitor, that we start, as we become an expert, we don't make as many mistakes because we're watching what we're doing along the way. And we have to remember that if we get something right the first time, we might not have gotten it right because we understood it. We might have just been lucky. And this happens sometimes in testing too. So it's not always that we really understood. And we have to think about the fact that making a mistake helps us go back and really understand it. So if we fail, we can go back, take a look, and understand that failure really is only an opportunity to learn. We go with our child, we look over something, we figure out where the failure occurred, and we remediate to help them learn so that the next time they understand, then their understanding is deeper. It's very interesting to think about Thomas Alva Edison had 999 failed versions of the light bulb. He invented the actual light bulb on the 1000th time. These are some interesting things that are out there in the world. Oprah, J.K. Rowling, she sold her book for $4,000. 12 publishers rejected her. Walt Disney was told that he had no imagination, he had no good ideas.
These are things to keep in mind when your child is feeling a sense of frustration and failure, is to know that some people that have been very, very successful have also experienced that sensation of failure, and perseverance and resilience is really important. And figuring out where we went wrong, going back and fixing it, is how we move forward. And one way to do that is, as a parent or a teacher, is to think about a time in your life when that happened, and tell that story and give that child the details. Tell them what you did, what happened, and how you overcame it. What are the specific steps? Not just that you did it, but what did you do to make that happen? And then ask them for their story. Maybe they can think about a time when something like that happened to them. When did they fail at something? And how did they react to it? Did they overcome it? How did they do that? If they didn't, what might they have done differently that they could do that in the future? So what are some specific steps that they can take? That is our last strategy, which is understanding that failure is not a bad thing, because actually when we fail, we learn more. I've never put together another piece of furniture and made a mistake when I was doing it, let me tell you, because of that one first time. So I check everything very carefully, and it taught me that across disciplines too. I do it in cooking, I do it in everything I do, because I don't want to go back and repeat that much work again.
Right, and I wanted to kind of wrap up as well with, I guess, my little piece and the fact that as a parent, especially if your kids are working on their own, or they're working at home, or they have homework to do maybe in after school, before you pick them up from work, you're not always going to be there. So I think teaching your kids how to have a game plan for when they're stuck, and don't quit when they're stuck. Write it down. You even in an online space, if they're a very techie kid, you can open up a Glogster or a Padlet, which we've talked about in prior presentations, and just have them jot down, the page number that they were stuck on, or the math problem they were stuck on, or the question that they needed to answer and they just needed your help, or they couldn't quite get it. Jot it down. Move on. Don't let that stop you from going to the next step for your day, and reinforce as a parent that we'll go over those notes or your glog later, and I will help. But don't make that the reason why you quit and you don't get anything done for the rest of the day. So just as a little kind of tip there. Now, we are going to have kind of a part 2 to this on December 1st that we would love to have everybody attend. And this is where we really break down the types of learners that are out there. So is your kid, do they learn best by watching videos or listening to the teacher or getting up and doing something, and talking through how the curriculum can be interacted with, how you can support your child in practice, and how they can learn in the best way that meets their needs, so that they can move forward and really deepen and transfer that learning into youth. So we would love to see everybody on December 1st for, I guess, the final part of this curriculum series in supporting your learners.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Are there any questions by anyone that's attending, or have there been any chat questions?